Okay. All right, so in chapter 5, you were taught how to estimate fractions. And when I think about your chapter 5 test, almost all of you knew how to do that. I may have just had like 1 or 2 of you in here who kind of had a little bit of a boo-boo on estimating fractions. But for the most part, almost all of you know how to do that. And that's good because you're going to need to use that information to help you with this lesson today. Okay? So the steps for success in order to be able to do this. Step number 1 simply says to estimate each fraction and see if the fraction is closer to a 0, a half, or 1. Right now, by a show of hands, if you looked at a fraction and you had to estimate if that fraction was closer to a 0, a half, or 1, who thinks they could do that? Good. Okay. I would hope everybody could, because that's a skill that came from chapter 5. Okay. So if you already know how to do what number 1 is saying, then you move on to step 2, which then says, then you just take those estimations and you add them together. Okay. So let me show you an example of one. Okay. So I'm going to kind of slide this down, and we have this little green problem right here. Okay. So go ahead real quickly and write this problem in your notes right underneath where your steps are. So the problem is 4/7 plus 6/10. All right, so let's use our steps. Step number 1 says that we're going to look at each fraction and we're going to estimate to see if it's closer to a 0, a half, or 1. So when we look at the fraction 4/7, what would we estimate that fraction, Olivia, to be? That's about a half, right? So underneath, I'm just going to kind of write what my brain is thinking, okay? Some of you are going to get to the point where you can maybe do some of this in your head, because this is kind of easy math. But for right now, we're putting our thoughts on paper, okay? So now let's look at the other fraction, because it says I have to estimate each fraction. So what about the fraction 6/10, Brady? What's it estimate to be? 1/2. That also estimates to be 1/2. Have we completed step 1?
Yes.
Yeah. It just says estimate each fraction and see if it's closer to a half, a 0, or 1. And we've done that. So now we're ready for step 2. And it simply says add those estimations together. So 1/2 plus 1/2 equals
1.
What? 1. That's your answer.
And even if you didn't get 1 at the beginning and you say you got 2/2, you can just simplify again.
True. Very true. Yeah. So when you start looking at fractions, think of fractions as something that you play with every day in life. Okay? Sometimes people like to think of fractions as food. So like if 1/2 plus 1/2, if like you didn't know instantly that 1/2 plus 1/2 was 1 whole, think of it in something like maybe food, okay? Like here's a pizza. If you ate half of the pizza the first day, that's what this one is. And you ate the other half the second day, you ate 1 whole pizza, right? Okay? So you can think of it that way. Maybe think of it as if food doesn't make it seem more clear, think of it as money. Okay? $1. What's half of a dollar?
50 cents.
50 cents. And if I have 2 50 cents, 50 cents plus 50 cents is $1, which is 1. Okay. So either way this works for you, you can visualize this kind of fraction addition as food, or you can visualize it as money. But that's all you got to do when you estimate and add fractions. Yes.
So what if it's like 0 and 0?
Then what's 0 plus 0? That would be your estimation. Yeah. Okay. So let's try another one. All right. So that one only had 2 fractions, but sometimes they'll have more than just 2, like this one. Okay.
I can do it.
So that one has a 1/8 plus a 5/6 plus a 3/20.
I already know what it is. I know what it is. Why grabbing that for me? This is easy. I can do this in my head. Be ready.
Just remember, I hear a lot of stuff about I'm doing it in my head, I'm doing it in my head.
All right, my answer.
And that sometimes worries me because that's when mistakes happen. You gotta be careful. All right, so let's put our thoughts on paper. So Shane, 1/8 is about what? That's about 0. 5/6, Shane, is about? That's about a 1. 3/20 is about? 0. And 11/12 is about? 1. What's 0 plus 1 plus 0 plus 1? 2. There's your answer.
Is that so? I can use the
You got 2. Excellent. Okay. So now, stop. I'm glad that you are enthusiastic that you're getting them right. Just remember, I only have a little bit of time to teach you stuff, so we cannot interrupt after every single problem. Okay, so when we talk about how your test is Thursday, and this is something that's going to be on the test, is this difficult stuff? No. Okay, let's look at one more example. Okay, this example here is slightly different. Copy this example, but then don't work it yet. Just copy it. This looks easy. Okay, just copy it. Just copy it. It's got 1 and 9/10 plus 3 7s. Plus 13 20s. Now, the reason why this one is somewhat different is because this one has a mixed number in it. And some of you are probably like not super sure what you're supposed to do with that mixed number. But what I want you to think about, mixed numbers, that whole number there is like already that it's 1 that we're going to have to add to the other stuff. So now we just look at the fractions. 9/10 is about what? 1. It's about 1. So if I had a fraction like 1 and 9/10, that's about how much? 2. It's about 2, right? I have 1 whole and about another whole, so that means the fraction 1 and 9/10 is about a 2, okay? So you can estimate it that way, or you can just bring the whole number down and keep it as a whole number there. I didn't line it up too great. Or you can go ahead and estimate that whole thing in your head, either way. But I brought the 1 down here, and now I'm just gonna estimate each of my fractions. 9/10 you all told me is about a 1. What about 3 7s? That's about a half. And what about 13 20? That's also about a half. So 1 plus 1 is 2. And then a half plus a half is 1. 2 plus 1 equals 3. There's your answer.
Do we have homework on this? Because if we do,
So what I want you to do, that's remember how I said I wanted you to have your workbook? Now I want you to get your workbook out. I want you to open your workbook to page 95.
Why does there have to be no more party for 3 hours? It's fine.